My greedy mother-in-law planned to steal my $20 million mansion by forging my signature. When I exposed her, she attacked me with a hockey stick, leaving me badly injured. My husband then locked me in a dark basement, leaving me alone to die. But they were unaware of my plans for revenge. The very next day, I returned with a shocking surprise they never saw coming. My name is Olivia. I'm 26 years old, and not too long ago, I thought I had the perfect life. It all started when I met Daniel at a charity gala. He was everything I had ever dreamed of: charming, successful, and incredibly handsome. He was 10 years older than me, in his mid-30s, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that made people stop and listen. We hit it off instantly. He made me feel special, like I was the only woman in the room. At that time, I had no idea how drastically my life would change because of him. Looking back now, I can't believe how naive I was, but back then, I thought I was stepping into a fairy tale. Daniel came from a wealthy family and lived in a sprawling estate in the suburbs. I remember the first time he brought me there, I was awestruck. It was like stepping into a movie set, with grand chandeliers, marble floors, and a lush garden that seemed to go on forever. But it wasn't just the mansion that captivated me. It was Daniel's mother, Evelyn. Evelyn was a polished woman in her 50s, always dressed impeccably. She seemed so kind and welcoming at first, almost like she was eager to have me in their family. "You're perfect for Daniel," she told me one evening, her voice smooth and warm. I was flattered. She had this way of making you feel like you were special. But there was something about her smile that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It felt calculated, like she was always 2 steps ahead of everyone. My parents passed away when I was young, leaving me a substantial inheritance, including a $20 million mansion. I had grown up hearing how fortunate I was, but I rarely thought about it. My life wasn't defined by wealth. It was defined by the people I loved. So when Daniel proposed to me after just 6 months of dating, I said yes, without hesitation. I believed I had found my happily ever after. Our wedding was a grand affair, straight out of a fairy tale. Evelyn spared no expense. "Nothing but the best for my new daughter," she told me, beaming. At the time, I thought she genuinely cared for me. But as the weeks turned into months, subtle changes started happening. Evelyn was always around, offering advice about my finances and my inherited mansion. "You don't need to worry about these things," she'd say. "Daniel and I will handle everything." At first, I thought she was just being helpful. I trusted her and Daniel completely. Looking back, the first red flag should have been when Daniel convinced me to transfer the deed of my mansion temporarily to simplify some legal formalities. He explained it so smoothly, and Evelyn chimed in, saying it was just a precaution. "Trust me, sweetheart," Daniel said, flashing that disarming smile of his. I didn't even hesitate. I signed the papers. Life felt too good to be true. But slowly, I started noticing cracks in the perfect picture. Daniel became less attentive, often consumed with work emergencies. Evelyn's warm demeanor began to feel overbearing, like she was always watching, always in control. One evening, I overheard Evelyn and Daniel talking in hushed tones in the study. I couldn't make out the details, but their voices sounded tense, almost conspiratorial. When I asked Daniel about it later, he brushed it off. "Business, nothing for you to worry about," he said, giving me a quick kiss before changing the subject. I tried to shake off my unease, convincing myself that I was imagining things. After all, Daniel loved me, didn't he? Evelyn treated me like family, or so I thought. But the doubts kept creeping in. One day, while cleaning up in the study, I stumbled upon a folder left on Daniel's desk. My curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside were copies of documents with my signature on them, documents I didn't remember signing. They detailed the transfer of my mansion to Daniel and Evelyn. My stomach churned as I realized what this meant. They had forged my signature. I felt a chill run down my spine. Everything started to make sense. The constant meddling, the sudden interest in my finances, and Daniel's recent distance. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there in front of me. That night, I confronted Daniel. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the documents. His expression darkened, and for the first time, I saw a side of him I didn't recognize. He didn't deny it. Instead, he called Evelyn into the room. She walked in calmly, her face unreadable, as if she had been expecting this. "Olivia, you don't understand how complicated this is," Evelyn said, her voice cold and sharp. "This is what's best for everyone." "Best for who?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "You're stealing from me." Daniel tried to grab the papers, but I held them tight. His charm was gone, replaced by something cruel. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his tone low and threatening. I couldn't believe what was happening. The man I had trusted, the man I loved, was working with his mother to betray me. The fairy tale I had believed in was unraveling before my eyes. And this was just the beginning. After confronting Daniel and Evelyn that night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, clutching the papers I had discovered, my heart racing with fear and anger. How could I have been so blind? The man I loved and the woman I trusted like a second mother were plotting against me. The next morning, I decided to confront them again. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. "Daniel," I said, finding him in the living room, "we need to talk."
"Now?"
He barely looked up from his phone. "Not now, Olivia. I'm busy." I wouldn't let him brush me off. "Busy stealing from me?" I snapped, throwing the papers onto the coffee table. He froze for a moment, then slowly turned to face me. "You're being dramatic," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me," I demanded. "Why is my signature on documents I never signed? Why are you trying to take my mansion?" Before he could respond, Evelyn walked in. She looked at the papers on the table, then at me, her face composed, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "Olivia," she said, her tone patronizing, "you're upset. Let's not blow this out of proportion." "Blow this out of proportion?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You forged my signature. You're trying to steal everything I have." Evelyn didn't flinch. She picked up the papers and examined them, then placed them back on the table. "You don't understand how difficult it is to manage something like this," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Daniel and I were trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I felt my anger boil over. "From what?" "My own inheritance." Daniel stepped in then, his voice low and firm. "You're being emotional, Olivia. You don't see the bigger picture." I stared at him in disbelief. This was the man I married, the man I thought I would spend my life with, and he was standing there, calmly justifying his betrayal. "You're both disgusting," I said, my voice trembling. "I want you out of my house."
"Now?"
Evelyn let out a sharp laugh, her composure finally cracking. "Your house?" she said, her eyes narrowing. "Sweetheart, it hasn't been yours for a while." That's when it hit me. The deed transfer. They already had control of the mansion. I had handed it to them, blindly trusting their lies. I felt a wave of panic rising in my chest. "You're not taking this from me," I said, my voice shaking but determined. Daniel moved toward me then, his face dark with anger. "You don't get to make that decision anymore," he said. "You're in over your head, Olivia." The tension in the room was suffocating. I didn't know what they were capable of, and for the first time, I felt truly unsafe in my own home. I decided to leave the room, needing to think, to plan my next move. But Evelyn wasn't done. As I turned to go, she grabbed a hockey stick that was leaning against the wall, a decorative piece, or so I thought, and swung it at me. I barely had time to react. The blow struck my side, sending me to the floor. Pain shot through my body as I lay there, gasping for breath. Evelyn stood over me, her expression cold and unfeeling. "You should have stayed quiet," she said, her voice as sharp as the pain radiating through me. Daniel grabbed the hockey stick from her, his face a mix of anger and panic. "That's enough," he said, though he didn't seem concerned for me, only worried about what might happen next. They carried me to the basement, where they locked me in. The cold, damp air pressed against my skin, and the darkness was suffocating. I was alone, hurt, and terrified. I had no idea what they planned to do next. Hours passed, Or maybe it was days. It was hard to tell in the dark. My body ached from Evelyn's attack, and my mind raced with thoughts of escape. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them take everything from me. I began to search the basement for anything I could use to free myself. My hands trembled as I felt along the walls, hoping for a way out. Then, by some miracle, I found an old, rusted nail. It wasn't much, but it was something. Using the nail, I began to work on the lock. It was slow, grueling work, and my injured body screamed in protest. But I refused to give up. I had to get out of there. I had to fight back. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the lock clicked open. I pushed the door open and stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding. I was free, but I wasn't safe yet. I needed a plan. I slipped into the study and grabbed my phone, which they had carelessly left behind. My hands trembled as I began recording a video, documenting my injuries and recounting what they had done to me. If I was going to take them down, I needed evidence. That night, I escaped the mansion. But I wasn't running away. I was preparing for the fight of my life. Escaping from that basement felt like a small victory, but I knew the real battle was just beginning. As I stumbled into the cool night air, clutching my phone with my recorded evidence, I realized the magnitude of what lay ahead. Evelyn and Daniel were ruthless, and they had already stripped me of my mansion. But they hadn't broken me. Not yet. I spent the first night at a nearby motel, nursing my injuries and trying to gather my thoughts. Every movement was painful, a reminder of Evelyn's attack, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the betrayal I felt. I couldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't. The next morning, I reviewed the video I had recorded. My face was bruised, my voice shaky as I recounted what they had done. It was raw and real, and I knew it was powerful. But I needed more. I couldn't risk going to the authorities without solid evidence. Daniel and Evelyn had the resources to twist the narrative in their favor. I needed a plan, one that would expose them completely. For days, I stayed under the radar, using the time to piece together my next steps. I combed through emails, financial records, and anything I could find that tied them to the forgery and theft. I had kept some documents hidden away in a secure folder on my laptop, and thankfully, they hadn't discovered it. Those documents, combined with my video, began to form a clear picture of their scheme. While I worked, I uploaded the video to a private server. I couldn't release it just yet. I needed to time it perfectly. But knowing I had it ready to go gave me a sense of control. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Then came the hardest part, confronting my own fear. Daniel and Evelyn had taken everything from me, and part of me wanted to disappear, to leave it all behind and start over. But I couldn't. This wasn't just about me, it was about justice. If I let them win, they would continue to prey on others, using their wealth and power to destroy lives. I had to stop them. One night, as I sat in the dim light of my motel room, an idea came to me. It was risky, but it could work. I would lure them back to the mansion, the very place they had stolen from me, and trap them in their own web of lies. If I played my cards right, the authorities would catch them red-handed. I reached out to Daniel, pretending to be remorseful. "I'm sorry for everything," I wrote in a carefully worded text. "I overreacted. Can we talk? I want to make things right." It didn't take long for him to respond. "We'll talk, but at the house. Tomorrow?" "Perfect." The next day, I returned to the mansion for the first time since my escape. My heart pounded as I walked through the familiar doors, now tainted with memories of betrayal. Daniel and Evelyn were waiting for me in the living room, their expressions guarded. "Olivia," Evelyn said, her voice as smooth as ever. "I'm glad you've come to your senses." I forced a smile, keeping my fear and anger buried deep. "I just want to move on," I said, my voice steady. "Let's figure this out." They seemed to relax, believing they had won. But what they didn't know was that I had already set my plan in motion. Hidden cameras were strategically placed around the house, recording every word, every move. I had also tipped off the police, providing them with enough evidence to take my claims seriously. They were waiting just outside, ready to act when the moment was right. As the conversation continued, I pressed them about the documents. "Why did you do it?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to seem genuine. Why betray me like this? Evelyn smirked, a cruel glint in her eyes. You wouldn't understand, Olivia, she said. It's about survival. You were too naive to handle something as valuable as that mansion. We simply took control. Daniel didn't even try to deny it. It's business, Olivia. Don't take it personally. I felt my anger rise, but I kept my composure. And the forgery? Locking me in the basement? Was that business too? Evelyn's smirk faltered, but before she could respond, I stood up. You won't get away with this, I said, my voice firm. Daniel laughed, a cold, hollow sound. What are you going to do, Olivia? Run to the police. They won't believe you. At that moment, the front door burst open, and the police swarmed in. Evelyn's face twisted in shock, and Daniel froze, his arrogance replaced with panic. The officers quickly apprehended them, and I watched as the two people who had tried to destroy me were finally held accountable. As they were led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one more thing to do. I uploaded the video. The moment I uploaded the video, I felt a rush of emotions, fear, relief, and a strange sense of power. The world needed to see the truth about Daniel and Evelyn to understand the nightmare I had endured. Within hours, the video began to spread online. People were horrified by the bruises on my face, the anguish in my voice, and the shocking story of betrayal and abuse. Comments of support poured in from strangers, their outrage igniting a wildfire of attention. News outlets picked up the story, and within days, my life was no longer just mine. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't a victim silenced in the dark. I was a woman fighting back. Meanwhile, the police investigation moved quickly. The evidence I had collected, combined with the footage from the cameras in the mansion, left no room for doubt. Evelyn's forgery, Daniel's complicity, and their coordinated efforts to steal my inheritance were laid bare for everyone to see. They tried to deny it at first, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. They couldn't talk their way out of this one. One of the most surreal moments came when I had to sit across from them in court. Daniel and Evelyn, once so powerful and untouchable, now looked small and defeated. Evelyn glared at me with icy hatred, while Daniel refused to meet my eyes. I stood tall, refusing to let their presence intimidate me. When I was called to testify, I spoke from the heart. I recounted everything, how I fell in love with Daniel, how Evelyn manipulated me, and how their betrayal shattered my trust. I told the court about the night Evelyn attacked me, about being locked in the basement, and about my escape. My voice wavered at times, but I didn't let my fear stop me. This was my chance to take back control, to show them that I wasn't the naive woman they thought I was. The turning point came when the recordings I had made were played in court. Evelyn's smug confession, Daniel's cold indifference, and their casual discussion of their schemes were impossible to ignore. The room was silent as the truth played out in their own words. In the end, the judge didn't hesitate. Both Evelyn and Daniel were found guilty on multiple charges, including forgery, assault, and unlawful imprisonment. Evelyn received the harsher sentence, as she was the mastermind behind their schemes, but Daniel wasn't spared either. Watching them be led away in handcuffs for the second time, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. After the trial, I returned to my mansion, not as a prisoner, but as its rightful owner. It felt strange at first, walking through those familiar halls, now empty of the people who had once filled them with deceit and danger. I spent weeks reclaiming the space, removing every trace of Daniel and Evelyn. It was painful, but it was also healing. This was my home, and I was determined to make it a sanctuary again. The public response to my story was overwhelming. People reached out from all over, sharing their own experiences of betrayal and resilience. I realized I wasn't alone, and that gave me strength. I decided to use my platform to raise awareness about financial abuse and domestic violence. If my story could help even one person escape a toxic situation, it would be worth it. Looking back now, I see how much I've changed. The Olivia who married Daniel was naive and trusting, but the Olivia who stands here today is stronger, wiser, and unafraid to fight for what's right. It wasn't an easy journey, and there were moments when I thought I wouldn't survive. But I did. I learned to trust myself again, to rebuild the life they tried to take from me. My scars, both physical and emotional, are reminders of what I endured, but they're also symbols of my resilience. I didn't just survive, I thrived. One evening, as I stood in the garden of my mansion, watching the sun set over the horizon, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The nightmare was over, and I was free. Free to live, free to love, and free to be myself. This is my story, not of defeat, but of victory. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way to rise again. You just have to find the strength within you to take that first step.